GMO. GMO is an acronym that represents genetic modification of food. In this country, it is so present that we don't really even know it. It's in so many different foods. And what it means is that on a cellular level, we're sort of splicing the seed and putting in things into that seed to make that seed hardier and more resilient for farming. So it means, creating a tomato that's going to be more resistant to pests, to different pests and bugs. You're sort of taking Roundup, which is, for many people they're familiar, that's a pesticide that's pretty toxic. And rather than putting it on the tomato, you're growing the tomato with Roundup genetically inside it to make it more resistant. And one of the reasons why Europe bans genetic modification of foods, we're always so slow in these things, right? There was a study done in England several years back, and they took tomatoes as a scientific study, and they tested 3 types of tomatoes. They tested regular tomatoes without pesticide, tomatoes with pesticide on them, Roundup, and then tomatoes that had pesticide, Roundup particularly genetically modified to be part of that tomato. And they tested the health of people. And it was a challenging study because, of course, some of the changes that you see in health are over time, right? But what they found was that obviously the regular tomatoes, represented health and didn't have any major, issues associated with it. The tomatoes that had Roundup sprayed on it were not that bad. Obviously, it's not ideal to have an anti-inflammatory diet and still eat food with pesticides on it, but to some degree it's a little bit unavoidable, right, because we do get it in some things. But the tomatoes that had Roundup pesticide genetically modified to be part of it created major illness, major illness, and it was very evident. And it was through that study that they ended up banning genetic modification throughout the European Union. So in this country, at least there's some legislation that's coming out to at least indicate what foods have genetic modification. In Connecticut, we're very forward there, and I'm not sure when that regulation has to be in effect. I think it's pretty soon. Not all the states have moved on that yet, but I'm sure it'll become a federal. It's like the tipping point, right? We're getting close to the tipping point. So ideally, if you can avoid it, at this point in time, if something is organic, it means there's no genetic modification. That doesn't mean in the future that's the case, because organic standards are modulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is not as stringent, it's not as aggressive in its standards as what organic used to be. But currently, if something says organic, it doesn't have pesticides in it. So it's a good place to start. And later in the coming up soon, I have a list of the foods that are better to eat organic and the ones that it's okay to eat non-organic. So it kind of gives you a
15.
You got it. Yeah, the famous clean 15 and dirty dozen.
Right.
Okay.